It was a late and quiet night, the kind where the world outside seemed to exist only in whispers. Arathia stood before the bathroom mirror, brushing her long, dark hair. The bristles of her hairbrush moved in smooth, rhythmic strokes, and the soft, rustling sound of the bristles against her hair was the only noise in the room. Her face, lit by the dim overhead light, looked tired but calm, like someone who had just finished a long day and was preparing for the peace of sleep. But something was off. A slight unease lingered in the pit of her stomach, a sensation she couldn't place. The reflection in the mirror seemed wrong. At first, she chalked it up to the tiredness in her eyes, a trick of the mind brought on by the late hour. But as she continued brushing her hair, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. Her reflection took longer than usual to mimic her movements. It was subtle at first. When Arathia raised her hand to guide the brush through a particularly tangled section of her hair, her reflection hesitated for just a moment before following suit. A heartbeat, maybe two, longer than she did. It was nothing that anyone else would notice, but it was enough to set her nerves on edge. Arathia stopped brushing and stared at the mirror, her breath hitching. The reflection did the same. No, it couldn't be. Her reflection continued to mirror her movements, but the delay increased. A few seconds this time. Arathia's heartbeat quickened. She took a step closer to the mirror, frowning. As she did, the reflection seemed to shift. It looked almost as though her own image was stretching, like the surface of the mirror was suddenly too tight to contain her. But the image held steady, like a painting fixed to the wall. Then, as if the reflection was aware of her scrutiny, it did something unexpected. Without warning, the figure in the mirror reached out. Arathia's eyes widened in horror as the reflection's hand moved forward, slowly but purposefully. The fingers, cold and pale, extended beyond the surface of the glass, and the reflection's hand reached for her own. "Do what?" Arathia stammered, taking a step back, her heart pounding against her ribs. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Before she could react further, the hand in the mirror grasped her wrist. It was as cold as ice, and the grip was unnaturally strong. Arathia gasped, trying to pull her hand away, but it felt like the hand had fused with her skin, like it had grown into her very wrist. "Let me go!" Arathia screamed, panic surging through her. She tugged harder, but it felt as though the more she struggled, the tighter the grip became. The hand in the mirror didn't relent, dragging her toward the glass. Her reflection, which had once mimicked her every movement with a sense of calm precision, was now smiling. But it was not the soft, familiar smile she was used to. No, this smile was twisted a mocking, cruel expression that stretched the reflection's lips wider than any natural smile could. Arathia's chest tightened. "No," she shouted, her voice breaking as she struggled against the force pulling her closer to the mirror. The reflection's grin only widened in response, as if it were enjoying her distress. The glass pressed against her face now, cold and hard. She could feel the smooth surface against her skin, yet there was an odd, suffocating sensation, as if the mirror had suddenly become a prison. "No, let me go," she screamed again, her voice strained with fear, but the reflection didn't listen. It continued to pull her forward, inch by inch. The cold hand on her wrist burned like ice, and every desperate tug only made it worse. With a final, frantic yank, Arathia pulled back with all her strength. There was a sharp crack, a sound so loud that it rang through her ears like a bell. The entire surface of the mirror shattered, but not a single shard of glass fell to the floor. Instead, the cracks spread like veins across the surface, and her reflection stepped out. It wasn't just the hand anymore. The whole body emerged, slipping out from the mirror as though the glass itself was no more than a veil, a thin, fragile layer between worlds. Arathia's heart lurched in disbelief. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror, as the figure of the woman in the mirror now stood fully before her. It was her, or at least it looked like her. But the woman standing in front of her, no, The thing standing in front of her wasn't the same as the Aradia in the room. Her reflection had a twisted, mocking air to it. The eyes, though identical, held a glint of something darker, something that made the real Aradia's stomach churn with unease. "What are you?" Aradia gasped, trying to back away, but her legs felt heavy, as though they were rooted to the floor. The reflection, the other Aradia, smiled, a cruel, predatory grin that stretched wider, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp, just a little too long. The smile was so unnatural that it made Aradia's skin crawl. "I'm you," the reflection replied, her voice a distorted echo of Aradia's own. It was her voice, yes, but it was colder, more mocking, as though it belonged to someone who had never known warmth. "No, you're not," Aradia whispered, fear creeping into her voice. The reflection's smile didn't falter. "I am. But I'm the version of you that you've locked away, the version you don't want to face." Aradia's mind spun, trying to make sense of the words. Her reflection stepped forward, slowly, as if savoring the moment. "I'm the part of you that you've buried deep down, the part of you that you refuse to accept." Aradia shook her head. "No, that's not possible. You're not real." The reflection cocked its head to the side, mimicking her movements exactly, but with a sense of twisted mockery. "Oh, I'm real, all right. And you're going to come with me." Aradia backed away quickly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She tried to move toward the door, but her body felt sluggish, like she was wading through water, too heavy to escape. The reflection's eyes gleamed with malicious intent as it reached out, a slow, deliberate motion. The hand, cold and pale, stretched toward her, fingers outstretched. "No, stay away from me," Aradia cried, pushing against the air as if she could physically ward off the reflection's touch. But it was no use. The reflection's hand closed around her wrist with the same icy grip. There was no escaping it this time. Aradia could feel the strength in that hand, pulling her in, dragging her back toward the mirror, just like before. Panic surged through her chest, but her body refused to respond the way it should. It was as though her limbs had gone numb, paralyzed by terror. "You belong here with me," the reflection whispered, her voice low and dark. "You always have." Aradia screamed as she felt the cold, suffocating glass press against her skin again. This time, however, there was no resistance. The reflection's body began to merge with hers, slipping into her own skin as if they were the same person. And then nothing. The bathroom fell silent. The reflection stood before the mirror, staring out at the room. Aradia was gone, trapped within the looking glass. Her once calm face, her once gentle eyes, now held the same twisted smile as the one that had replaced her. The woman in the mirror, her reflection, looked at the world outside and smiled. "Let's see how long it takes before someone else notices."